This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. Sometimes it's funny to look back. There was a period of maybe 18 months in 2008-9 where this guy was viewed as a decent club player who at age 24 was probably not going to have much of an international career. And now he stands atop the tree. As an Irishman, his trophy cabinet exceeds everyone who has ever pulled on the green or very deep blue. As a fly half, only Johnny Wilkinson and the late great Phil Bennett can stand peers to his accomplishments in the history of European rugby. And as a captain, well, this Saturday, Jimbly from Sexdog did something only 3 of his countrymen have ever achieved before. Jackie Kyle, Brian O'Driscoll, Rory Best, and now Jock Nation Sex Drink. This weekend, Ireland completed just their 4th Grand Slam in history, an achievement that takes them clear as the world's #1 team over a tournament that cemented their place as genuine proper World Cup contenders. They're now nailed on as the best. No one can make an argument as they defeated a hugely improved England side who put in arguably their best performance of the championship so far, yet came up short against an inspired Ireland determined to deliver the whole stinking thing on home soil for the first time ever. So how did Ireland overcome an edition of the old enemy with the spirit of John Pullen flowing through their veins? What can England take out of the game? And are either side set to achieve anything special as we look ahead? There's something coming up for them. As an occasion, this game reminds me more than a little of the 2011 Rugby World Cup final. A home side faced with an enormous weight of expectation from both a world waiting to see if the praise they've been lavishing on this team can finally come good and turn into silverware, and a nation waking that morning knowing they're about to see something they've waited their entire lives for. Up against an opponent who broadly brushed off as being rubbish because they've played like shit in that competition, instead decides to go down swinging, performing so much better than expectations, putting in their best performance of this championship. Ireland's biggest attribute this last year has been their unfaltering accuracy. Pulling plays so well rehearsed, the West End's going jealous, with more effortless execution than Henry VIII if he joined Tinder. And much like the All Blacks who tore up every opposition 12 years ago on their path to that showpiece, when presented with the final showdown, with an expectant crowd in their home stadium on their back, uncharacteristic nerves started to set in, and things became a little more shaky. This is Ireland's first proper set phase attack of the game. It's a pretty simple starter play, the sort they run in, these are random examples from against Italy. Van der Fleer hits the 9, who then has 3 options outside and the winger inside, all running varying lines. The goal is mostly to hide who's going to make the carry from the defence until as late as possible, which should gift them a dominant carry or even a line break, as the tackle is only setting into position to make that tackle last second. Here, however, everybody gets their lines wrong. As the ball gets to Gibson Park, all the players are pretty much static. No one's running at all. Second receiver is in front of first receiver. Nobody's got any deception at all. All the options are obvious. They're good at standing still. It's like watching Wales. Lowe's pass is telegraphed. Tuolangi smashes Archie behind the game line. It's maybe the first inaccurate first phase move Ireland have ran in, maybe 2 years? Atoje and George have worked incredibly hard then to get round to the blind side, and as having only just taken position leaves them unable to apply much line speed, James Ryan then makes a superb carry on George's outside, and it really gets Ireland going. They've got so much momentum now, except George does really well here. Ryan's heading into him very much hoping to trap the hooker on the floor, take out 2 defenders at once with his carry, and leave Atoje and Arundel defending the flank alone. But George doesn't bite at all. He knows what he's looking to do. They've done a lot of homework on Ireland, was evident throughout this game, and he stays on his feet really well, bouncing out to allow Atoje to cover significantly more space. Ireland can get on the outside of Arundel, who somehow managed to be the greenest player on the pitch in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, but Atoje covers and makes an enormous nuisance of himself. He's so good at this. Ireland's average ruck speed this tournament has been around 2.3 seconds, and Atoje gets this up to 7 here single-handedly and requires 3 bodies to clear him out, just through superb tackle choice. It allows the English defence to set fully, except that nerves lead to another burst of extremely mild inaccuracy that has a knock-on effect. Porter is in the best position to carry here. He's going to make the best carry of all of the options, and Sextrap identifies that instantly. Except Baird and Sheehan have overrun it slightly and blocked the pass, meaning Sexlog has to rush it to get it between them. It bounces, it's all over the place, the defence is suddenly on top. Ireland have lost their shape by the next phase. Sex Monkey gets smashed himself behind the game line, and Jack Willis gets in there to win a brilliant turnover, which allows England to clear the ball. Ireland's style, tempo and choices remained intelligent as ever, but odd, nervy errors were slipping into their game. I'm pretty sure the last time I saw Hugo Keenan make a mistake it was on a spelling test, yet every single time Ireland fixed it at the next available opportunity. The second time Ireland get into English territory, there seems to be a shift in mindset about Jubbly Wub Sex Wedge. Focus is no longer on Ireland, but instead looking for and ripping into every English smallest weakness they can find. Dan Sheehan makes a phenomenal carry here, and the English defence is still setting and gets on Ribbons outside and manages to crawl further along the ground, makes so much ground, getting Ireland so far and so fast on the front foot. After missing that tackle 15 metres back, way back there, Dave Ribbons has to absolutely hair it to get back in the line. By the time Gibson Park is getting the ball out, Ribbons is still offside, and Sexyam spots that. He calls a very simple shape and they execute it flawlessly to target Ribbons. Van der Fleer runs straight at him and bodies his inside shoulder as he's trying to adjust, trying to get in position, and it allows the 10 to hit Keenan in behind, who can rip right through the defence. Ribbons, you could say, torn to Dave's. The surely nailed-on player of the tournament makes it up to the 5 metre line, and Ireland keep the pressure on, attacking the line hard and varying the play nicely, getting to phase 8 before a brief moment of that nervy inaccuracy slips in once again. With the pace of the English defence, Furlong doesn't have time to look at Sexhorse before passing to him, and he misses the target. Attack 1 lasts 4 phases, one of them's great, 3 of them off Ireland's usual accuracy. Attack 2 is 9 phases, 8 of them are fantastic with 1 sloppy pass right at the end. But from attack 3 onwards, Ireland have returned to their usual standards, even under the enormous amount of once-in-a-lifetime pressure they're under. It's the sign of a true championship team. Not the ability to dominate and get things right, but to fix it when things are wrong. And that first half, combined with the entire 80 at Murrayfield, shows the Andy Farrell faction can really do that. But that wasn't the only tie to the 12 years gone showpiece, as Ireland's edge also saw itself settled by a lovely set move try, finished by a pretty remarkable front row forward, just as New Zealand's was in 2011. For those of you old enough to remember 2020, you may have some vague recollection of this move being all over the place. In 2019, it became quite the trend to slot your hooker onto the tail of the line-out in defence, with your scrum off filling in the usual hooker channel and a back rower into the receiver here. And whilst we saw a few moves in that tournament designed to exploit teams such as Georgia here, who have a slower, more old-school kind of scrummaging first hooker, it really exploded the following year. Typically less athletic, the hook would have to hustle further than a flanker in order to close off the space inside the main defensive line, and that presented opportunity to open a disconnect. This move was all the rage. Your own hooker drifting hard to pull the opposite number out, and a winger then hitting inside line to steam through for an easy clean break. However, soon enough after a few months, defences figured it out. If you saw a winger coming in narrow, the hooker only needed to call a little support and stand their ground, closing the space off instantly. What Ireland ran on Saturday was a kind of genius twist on a modern classic. England defaulted back to hooker Jamie George standing in the traditional channel here, Don Brandt at the tail, not George. Ireland throw slap bang in the middle ball, so there's no risk of the maul crossing the 50 metre line or the 5 metre line, hence not allowing the English players that aren't part of the line out to come in and close off this space. They remain offside, they have to stay behind. Ireland form the maul, England snap onto it. George and Sinclair, however, don't engage. Confident England have enough to halt them, and instead they mark the short side. Ludlam hedges his bets on the fringe of the maul, in position to engage or break off depending on what Ireland do. Except what Ireland do is beautiful, subtle, and packed with amazing attention to detail. Teams have got so used to watching wingers come in and around these areas, so Ireland purposely drop Gibson Park and Lowe, the winger, right behind each other in the starting box parallel to the maul behind it, and the pair of them peel off round the blind side. The entire time, George and Sinclair are watching them, and the moment they go in motion, Ludlam breaks off to attack them too. And yet, this well-established threat acts only as a bluff, because teams are watching for it these days. 3 English defenders have now been held on the short side to watch 2 Irish attackers who aren't interested in the ball, whilst Jack Van Portfleet, covering the backfield, notices as well and moves right on the touchline to cover if they beat the front rowers. This leaves just Don Brandt marking the immediate open side. Just 3 years ago, this was a move run by wingers, and as Ludlam demonstrates, teams got very used to watching for that. What nobody was watching for in the situation, however, was the hooker. Sheehan throws in and starts walking in field slowly. Every English player, and almost all spectators, pay no heed to this, as he's surely just working in to join them all at the tail like all hookers do, then he'll carry for a bit and whatever. Except as Van der Fleer breaks off, the flanker crabs sideways and it pulls Don Brandt, the sole defender on this side, remember, out. The bing bong, big Quim, big man follows only for Sheehan to track inside. 3 years ago, this was a move run by wingers, but now Ireland have Dan Sheehan, a hooker so lightning quick this becomes viable. It's a genius piece of play that utilises the unique aspects of this Irish side. It's a play they never could have run with Rory Best, or most teams in the Six Nations, or the rest of the world, couldn't really run this, because who the hell has a hook as fast as Dan Sheehan to run a line normally reserved for wingers? It's a move bespoke to the players running it, a weapon designed to be used in specific circumstances, and reminiscent of how Andy Farrell's continued building his collection of websites ever since he signed up to Squarespace last month. still bowled over by how bloody easy it is to make a simple, beautiful website using Squarespace, Andy found himself wondering whether he could boost squad morale by making a page for every player in his wider squad. You know, a gallery for James Ryan, some YouTube videos for Craig Casey. He loves blue YouTube, does Craig Casey. And anyone who knows Rob Herring knows he really loves integrated mailing lists. He could do all of this. It was so easy for Andy Farrell to put together pages with the work rate he normally drives from his Irish players, with so many features to make each player's page feel unique and theirs. And if you want to build this kind of morale in your own squad or make a website for any other reason, you can head to the link in the description and use the offer code SquidRugby to save yourself some money. Now, much like the version of Irish history I was taught in school, I haven't really mentioned anything that England did, yet this was probably the best performance of the Borthwick era so far on Saturday. There wasn't much in the way of creativity or really attack at all, but the core tenets of what Carlisle's baldest cut of prime beef was brought in to achieve were very much in place. The kicking game, led by Owen Farrell, was genuinely exceptional and limited Ireland's chances superbly. Anthony Watson, in the most extraordinary circumstances, forced to play two positions, both wing and fullback, put in genuinely, watching this a few times, one of the best individual performances of the entire championship this year. He was completely unbelievable. The set piece was very solid. Jamie George's try incredibly well deserved for both the team and his individual performance. He was fantastic. But the main tentpole of this uptick was the quality of their defence, something best underlined by the way they managed to hold Ireland out in the final play of the first half, right after the red card to this guy. He's called Freddie Stewart, to this guy. This was an utter masterclass of maul defence by Jack Willis. Ireland are slowly working towards the line, and as Itoje tries to focus on disrupting Ireland's main drive, Willis slowly spins onto the outside and then round to Ireland's side, all without changing his bind. The Irish, meanwhile, know exactly where the space is. With Stewart off the field, Watson is now playing two positions and is manually having to switch here as they crab in field to open up the blind side. The space, even with Watson there now, is enormous. Ireland continue working it in field with the maul, and the space still remains enormous, even if Van Portfleet is trying to make himself big like he's trying to scare off a bear to convince Ireland otherwise. And so, Gibson Park runs a play that Ireland love. They do this all the time. Bouncing out to first receiver so Sheehan can play 9, allowing him to play 10 as they overwhelm JVP with 3 runners on this side. Except, spotting this, Jack Willis takes action. He spins onto Ireland's side and turns to the referee, making a big show of asking if he's okay to be here, and at the same time, as he's asking that question and waiting for a reply, he subtly links arms with Sheehan, the ball carrier. He now can't play the ball, he can't break off, he's stuck in this maul, but being a fair, communicative referee, Jaco Piper isn't going to penalise Willis until he's answered his question first. It's only fair. It takes Piper 4 seconds to answer, and in that time, Willis is able to smuggle Sheehan deep into the maul, milking an extra few as he theatrically withdraws, but best of all, times it for the exact moment Gibson Park comes in for the ball to retrieve it, walking right between the scrum half and the ball itself, preventing his chance to get it out, buying England an extra few seconds for Itoje and co to successfully spin Sheehan onto the outside the maul, meaning once Willis gets back on side, he can make contact himself with the ball carrier. It's brilliant, and carry him out of the maul and back 5 metres, totally negating the Irish pack's effort on his own. Ireland do eventually recover the ball and get it out, but it's slow, and English defence fronts up. Ellis Genge makes a brilliant hit, and whilst a phase later England reload and try to work wide, Willis can make another great tackle, and England's work rate just becomes absolutely enormous. The defence Sinfield is building is built on remarkable work rate. Huge numbers folding around each ruck to hit hard, 2 or 3 every time at least, an initial contact ceasing momentum, an assist tackler then dropping them to the deck, but here Tuolangi does it alone, and then after one more phase he aids in an even better contact, forcing a knock on and keeping England in the game as the half-time whistle goes. Borthwick England era look set to pride themselves on work rate, and if this game was anything to go by, to make a lot of English people very proud. Yet, after a quick chance to regroup and further time to settle, Ireland pretty quickly worked out they were able to use England's endless effort against them. The Robbie Henshaw try that ultimately took the game beyond England is a pretty simple 21 play, which just means the team plays 2 phases in field then 1 back the way it came, 2 then 1. But its deployment and execution is exceptional. With Stewart now off the field, England have been using Watson at fullback and a combination of him and Van Portfleet to cover the wing that Watson left empty, and Ireland managed to bamboozle them. First through this brilliant kick by Sexlimp, putting it in behind Watson into such an impossible position for him to get out of, and then once again, off the scrum, it gifts the boys in green. Look how hard in that previous passage just before half time, England work to reload. They're constantly throwing resources in the direction players headed to meet Ireland as fiercely as possible, as fast as possible, wanting to get as many tacklers as possible into them, and that's what they want to do here again. Ben Curry is involved in the initial tackle, and 2 other back rowers work incredibly incredibly hard to get out and make the following tackle. They're in position here, some 20 metres away from the position of the scrum, just 6 seconds earlier. Andrew Porter, a phenomenal try scorer who they know they have to watch, takes position between the posts, and filling in between Curry and Ribbons, which sounds like a party to me, is Ellis Genge, who 10 seconds earlier was the prop on the near touchline in this scrum. The England player who has the most reason, excuse, cause to get there last, to not work that hard. Every single English forward has flooded round. They've worked impossibly hard. Sinclair watching the fringe as the rest head in field to repel the threat. Except, as hard as they work, Ireland work harder. Their initial play of the scrum is a simple crash ball by Bundy O'Keefe, with Henshaw and Van der Fleer clearing out, quick ball generated, and those players now on the floor. Conan carries, with Ryan and Doris arguably Ireland's two best clear-out options either side. This allows for incredibly fast ball, and England are happy to fold entirely with only Sinclair watching for the snipe here, because there's simply no threat from an Irish perspective. The only Ireland players on this side are on the floor, they're not on their feet, they're not options. But that won't be the case for long. With this being pre-called, Archie, Henshaw and Van der Fleer know exactly where they need to be the moment they're able to get back on their feet, and Gibson Park knows it's going blind without even scanning. He doesn't look the other way once. Archie, on his arse seconds earlier, receives the ball. Van der Fleer never stops moving. His arc from getting back up to his feet to retreating onside to fantastic dummy line to block Dave Ribbons once again are one and the same. It's one continuous movement, just carrying straight on and going shoulder on shoulder into the lock, preventing him drifting to help Farrell out. Crucially, Farrell is also getting back up the floor from having made the previous tackle on Archie, and as anyone who's ever played rugby before can tell you, it's a lot easier to make 2 touches than 2 tackles in 10 seconds. Moments earlier, Slade has made a great spot, noticing Hansen is unmarked on the wing, so he sends Van Poortvliet off to go and cover the touchline with Stewart off the field. If England are at 15 players, Van Poortvliet can instead adjust the play and try and fill in closer, rather than herring out towards the absolute touchline. But knowing if this goes wide, it's Jamie George covering 2 men in a 15-metre channel. He's having to really throw himself out wide, and so when the ball gets to Archie, there's no pressure on him beyond Farrell, and it allows him to pick off the fly half, because then Henshaw has the easiest role of all: take the pass and score the try to put Ireland in command of their Grand Slam decider. Here's the irony of the whole thing. If England were lazier in defence, Genge or another forward is probably still lingering out here, and it saves the try, because they can make this shot on Henshaw. But Ireland used England's own work rate against them, as well as leveraging the space opened up by the red card. Jamie George unable to come in tight because he's having to watch 2 men. Now, I've got in trouble for saying this in the past when talking about Ireland games, but I don't think the red card had that great an impact on the final scoreline. Yet, the space it created was still something Ireland leveraged beautifully for Sheehan's second score. It's a bit like a mega mix of everything Ireland had done well in attack over the whole game. Repeatedly targeting same defenders, catching Van Poortvliet struggling to cover second position, cutting back to the same side over and over, passing to Dan Sheehan. It all begins with a great English countermall forcing Sheehan to break off himself, and the fresh on the field Centurion, and I'm not sure whether that refers to caps or years of age, Dan Cole makes the tackle. Ireland carry in field, and Vunipola and Curry do the double hit tactic. Curry doing a lovely, great job slowing it down, but once again, England have used that extra second that Curry buys them to bounce outwards, filling the open side, filling the main field, and cutting Ireland's options on this side down to basically getting smoked behind the gain line. However, after making that tackle, scrummaging god come inanimate object, Dan Cole has stumbled back to his feet and taken position out wide. But that's exactly the same moment Van Poortvliet has decided to drop out to the backfield to cover it. Gillyweed Sextrap takes one quick glance at JVP and calls for JGP to go blind, and the team slot in beautifully. Ribbons is initially setting to watch the inside to cover James Ryan here, but spots it's Cole on the wing and goes, oh shit, I should do something about this, so bounces out to cover the wing himself, figuring Cole marking Ryan is at most worth 1 metre, 2 metres over the gain line, but much like the 21 Lions, Ireland skip Ryan entirely. Him leaving the ball is a beautiful touch. A lot of second rows wouldn't follow through and they take this and try and crash over the gain line, but it allows Hansen to make a really lovely touch. It's a simple draw and give to get outside Ribbons without giving anyone a chance to drift across. He's really quick with it. Sheehan bursts down the wing, and whilst JVP does get there to make the tackle, Cole gives Curry a tiny shove as he goes to enter the breakdown, and it means nobody's there to contest the ball, and Ireland can play at an infinitely stupid pace. Baird in field carries, but Curry keeps to England's exceptional endless work rate and flits in field, only to find himself in no man's land as Ireland, just as on the previous score, use the same runners yet again another phase in a row and look to catch England working too hard. Once again, it's Ryan running decoy with Hansen at first receiver, targeting the same defenders who just made the tackle. Conan has stayed out wide after clearing out on Sheehan's previous carry and can slip on the outside of Ribbons, and Van Porthley, only just back up to his feet, has made a panic read. He hedges his bets on it going to Sheehan, expecting a mispass, meaning he has to then readjust onto Conan, allowing him to dominate the contact and slip the ball outside to his hooker, who scores yet again in the corner. The style of rugby Ireland have adopted is so breathtaking to watch because it seems so breathtaking to play. Every single runner is required to play so many roles, so many times, yet in the most attractive, open, expansive, beautiful system imaginable. It's turned the team into the nailed-on, undisputed best team in the world. It's got them to that point where they're like the All Blacks a few years ago, where you'd kind of see them score a spectacular try and go, oh yeah, it's just what they do, rather than, oh my god, that's the best try I've ever seen. And after a few years of bedding in and a full season of just building this confidence relentlessly, they're now in such a shape that they can twist, turn, chop and change and lose no accuracy or continuity. England showed aspects of how to defeat them at points, but it required a level of focus they couldn't keep up for 80 minutes, and a lot of it was Ireland getting things wrong themselves. Those nerves they simply had to overcome, preventing them taking the chokehold on the game early on, as they did in 3 of their first 4 games of the Six Nations and in both their successful tests in New Zealand. They've become big-time a team who's reliant, focused on getting ahead early on, yet they were still able to come back from not managing that. The big question now stands as whether they can possibly break their quarter-final curse. But if Saturday is anything to go by, a lot of that comes down to not whether they're good enough, because they certainly are, but whether looking to overcome an invisible obstacle that they've never vaulted, yet doesn't really exist, they're just playing a one-off game, is remotely like the pressure of 60,000 fans sitting in your home stands begging you to secure a prize they've only ever seen won fleetingly few times on overseas soil. Is something that's only ever happened 4 times, remotely like something that happens every 4 years. But it's also, more importantly, a question for another day. Because Saturday for Ireland was a day we'll look back on. A day they achieved something historic, something they've rarely achieved, and they've certainly never achieved in this kind of style. The day this man went beyond every other point scorer in 6 Nations, 5 Nations, 4 Nations history. The day he lifted not just his team, but the trophy, and a trophy Ireland have seldom secured before. And the day he made it quite clear, no matter what anyone else says about him retiring, he's showing no signs of slowing down. It's funny to look back sometimes. I remember the multiple points over the last few years where any of us, and I was chief amongst these fools quite a few times, saw a few poor games from a man going grey and shouted, Ireland probably need to move on from this guy. But Saturday proved there's no need. There's no doubt. And there's no way you can imagine the Six Nations without him. Jackie Kyle, Brian O'Driscoll and Rory Best might have been and gone. But if this campaign has been anything to go by, I'll be stuck making up names for this man forever. Hey, thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video and the Six Nations in general. It's bloody been going on, and here it is now. There's more videos around the channel, as you can see, popping up right now. Go and have a look at other videos on the Six Nations. There'll be more coming up. Going to have a deep dive on Uruguay ahead of the World Cup, as well as the Women's Six Nations, which starts this week, and we'll be looking at as it goes along. Thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon for more rugby.